Thanks for listening to High Tech Simplicity. Today's sponsor was Savvy. Savvy makes reliable, safe, and good-looking AV equipment and mounts. Justin, you've used them in a few different applications, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're fantastic.
They make camera stands, speaker mounts, mic holders, and custom AV solutions that really fit the mold of your church, your venue, those kinds of things, where you might need to hang a mic, put a camera up, something like that. Maybe hang a speaker in a very custom way. Savvy and Jeff, who's a good friend of both of ours, can really take care of you from that standpoint.
Yeah. Check them out on savvyus.com. That's their website. But like Josh was saying, everything that he's done has just been amazing. It's super pretty. It's super functional. And I can't tell you how many times I have installed one of his products and someone comes in and goes, "Ooh, what is that?"
Right.
And yeah, it's super custom without actually being, custom outside of like the laser engravings and stuff like that.
Right.
Which I think is the cool thing. It's like everyone feels like they're getting a custom piece for their business or their church.
Yeah, and honestly, like I saw one of his mounts recently. Like I couldn't even find a weld. It was just unbelievably clean. So really, really recommend you guys check Savvy out. Check us out on the web, right?
High Tech Simplicity. Yep. So we have our Facebook and our YouTube, and we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Store, and a bunch of other things. We're on Anchor as well. So hit subscribe. Because this is a tech podcast, I'm going to kind of just open up this like curtain of what this is. And what we really need you to do is we need you to subscribe. It's really important that you subscribe.
It is.
For the algorithms that YouTube uses, and for Apple Podcasts and for Spotify. Those are super important. It's also really, really important for you to listen to the entire thing. We have an episode 0 that's only 10 minutes long.
Yeah.
And it's super easy, super short.
Just Justin and I?
Yeah, just me and Josh, just sitting there kind of talking, telling you what is going on here. But listening to that 10-minute all the way through is going to be really, really important for us. And obviously listening to this one all the way through, even if it takes you multiple times sitting down to get all the way through it,
right.
Listening through it all the way gets us on the new and noteworthy, which is really important, really hard to do unless you get this. So we would really, really appreciate it if you could just do that for us. And also share everything. Give us thumbs up, give us likes, give us all those kind of things.
Right.
Today's podcast, we talked with Jesse Stevens about the 3 pieces of technology that influenced you or changed your life. So we would love for you to comment down below and let us know what 3 pieces of technology changed your life or maybe ruined your life. I mean, I guess we'll take anything. We just want you to comment.
Anything.
Yeah. Join this community. We talked with Jesse about a bunch of things. I think we
went down a lot of roads.
Went down a lot of roads. I think we talked about space travel at one point in time.
We did. And Mars.
We talked about coding for a little bit. Yeah. So we talked about a bunch of things. So thanks so much. And yeah, let's kick it over to our podcast with Jesse Stevens.
All right, let's go. Welcome, Jesse Stevens. How are you today?
Hey, fellas. How's it going? Everything's good over here.
I like how you did that like we're on the radio.
Yeah. I mean, it was Vobrust.
I mean, sure.
I think I made a word up. Jesse, how are you?
I think you were full of breast when you said that, Josh.
Oh, okay. How are you today, Jesse?
Things are good, man. I'm here in Colorado. I mean, right now in northern Colorado, and luckily the smoke is cleared this week. Although we're getting a bit of a heat wave coming up. So
right on. What is a heat wave this time of year though? Like 75?
No, it's going to be like 85 during the day.
Oh,
midweek this week. Yeah. I mean, like last week it was, high of 65, 70, and then down to 40s at night, bringing plants inside sort of weather. And then now it's going to go back up. Cool. My wife loves it. I hate it. I was ready to go roll into the fall here.
Right. Well, hey, today we're going to talk about technology and the top pieces of technology that have changed our lives.
Yes. Right? Top 3.
And I know this is hard. This was like really, really hard for me to come up with what it was. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think I probably burned through like 35 things.
Yeah. I kept thinking about things that were far too specific or far too broad. Yeah. It was really hard.
Yep. Same here.
How about you, Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying. I basically had one answer for all three, and I'm trying to find a way. I've been trying to find a way into it that doesn't sound trite and boring, but also brings a new spin, and then maybe gets a bit more specific from there. But
Right.
yeah, it was hard. I mean, technology. I'm a huge technology fan, as everybody knows about me, and like I'm a bit broad in my definition of technology. Like for me, everything's technology, and then all of a sudden it becomes part of your daily life. So when something passes into that sort of like when something's as ubiquitous as like a pencil or a pen, like that was a piece of technology at one point.
Right.
So when something becomes as ubiquitous as that, all of a sudden, like when does it become technology and not? So yeah, it was definitely a fun one to ponder.
Wow. Yeah. So you said something there that everybody knows about me, right? And so I thought maybe you should share a bit about you and kind of what makes you special, because you are special.
Oh, am I special?
You
wow,
are.
Thanks,
I mean,
Josh. I don't know.
yeah.
I didn't know I needed to hear that today, but I guess I did.
If people don't know, Jesse and I have become really good friends over the past few years. And but I would like you to share a little bit about you with us, about what makes you tick, what professionally you've done, because it's pretty freaking impressive, I must say.
Well, thanks, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't feel like it at this point in COVID, right? Because everything I've done is no longer like not of use to anybody anymore.
Right.
Because, so basically, when I was a bit of I grew up in Vermont, and I was a bit of a sort of a misfit in high school. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. Was not a good student. Got into a theater program, in high school. The teacher was great. He said, "Hey, I don't know if you're doing college, but you should check out this school." So I went to a school called North Carolina School of the Arts, which turned out to be like a great arts conservatory, very well respected. And I ended up going for sound design and engineering. Cut to 4 years later, I got out of school. My girlfriend at the time was going to New York City, so we moved to New York City together. And I just started hustling. I wasn't really sure at that point what I wanted to do. So I started working off-Broadway musicals, basically. Started doing load-ins and load-outs, knowing the scene, building shows. From there, I worked up to mixing, and then I started working on Broadway. So I basically spent the last 15 years, well, a few years back now, working on Broadway, 10, 15 years, doing Broadway musicals. Nice. Started doing shows at Radio City Music Hall, was doing big Broadway musicals, big tours, big special events, one-offs, things like that. A lot of studio work in New York City, and just sort of doing that hustle for a while. And that was awesome. It was a great time. I had a lot of great experiences. I'll say that during those 10, 15 years, like I didn't have many friends. I didn't have any family really that I saw. I didn't see my family very much at all. It was just, you're always working.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so for the last 4 years, I was working at All Acoustics. So I tried to maybe find a way that I could parlay my skills into doing something a bit more real life job, even though it was a bit of travel and stuff. But yeah, I was a design application engineer at All Acoustics. Designing installations, designing theatrical events, and then also working with the cutting edge Eliza technology, the immersive audio technology.
Yeah, which L Acoustics is how ultimately you and I met.
Yeah, which is where I met Josh. Josh was hired a month or two before I was.
I mean, I think it was not a lot, maybe a couple months. Yeah,
and we were applications employees 3 and 4 basically at the time.
Which was neat and fun to see that growth. But also you and I would say we were unlikely friends.
Yeah, definitely different sides of the, grew up in different places, definitely different politically, definitely different in a lot of ways for sure.
But that's awesome, man. Your experience and who you are just as a person, personally, but also professionally, I think is really why we wanted to have you here for episode 1 with us.
Nice.
And the topic, as we mentioned, again, is really broad, right? Like technology, like what technology has changed your life.
Yeah. And Jesse, I think like what he said is like, the pencil technically was technology at some point in time. Right. Like when paper was invented, that was a piece of technology. So I think that technology is just such a broad thing.
Right. And I think the lens of what we're going to talk about today is really interesting because we're split a bit in terms of years, but I read a statistic the other day that we are, and I'm going to lump all 3 of us in this, but we were the last generation who didn't grow up with immediate access to information.
Correct.
Right. So everybody past us started to have that whole thing. And I think the lens of the technology for us will be, kind of I guess
Yeah,
encompassed in that.
I read the thing I think you're talking about, or something similar, and I was born in the last year of that like time frame,
Right.
where it's like we're kind of in between two generations,
Right.
where we are old enough to remember a time before the internet, really, and cell phones and everything, but like we're young enough that like we still technically grew up with it within reason,
Right.
and it puts us in a very unique position. I think
it's called the fully connected generation or something to that effect.
Yeah, something along those lines. I've heard it called like 4 or 5 different things.
I still remember having to go to the library for a book report and like pull out the encyclopedia and look up all the stuff about the country I was doing a book report on. Right. So, but that was when I was like, 10, 11, 12, right? By the time I was 13, 14, and I grew up in Middlebury, Vermont, which despite being a small town in Vermont has a really expensive school called Middlebury College in the town. And Middlebury College is like one of the most expensive schools in the country. It's sort of like a side Ivy League. So from when I was 13 or 14, I was already in the computer lab up there. I mean, now listen, we had gotten somebody's login. We were playing Quake basically all the time, and like sex chat rooms and stuff, like trying to find porn basically. So I'm not like I was like learning how to crack anything or like write software at that age, but definitely like 13, 14 was when I started being like completely plugged in.
At like
Netscape Navigator 24/7,
Yeah, at 13 or 14, we were in computer class, and we were able to start making other computers in the computer lab pop up errors, like fake errors. And like the computer teacher, I just remember going, I just don't know. It says it's user error. It literally says user error.
So I have 2 things to add to this conversation, and they're both drastically different. But number one, my son apparently got in trouble because him and another buddy, they have these Chromebooks at school, and they apparently figured out how to hack the Chromebooks at school so they could play Fortnite on them.
Of course they did.
At school. And they're in separate classrooms, and they're 10. So
that doesn't surprise me.
Super impressed by that. But beyond that, if I fast forward to when I was 10, so I went to this computer camp, and I would go to Grand Rapids Community College and go to computer camp. And this was a thing I did for like 2 weeks in the summer.
Wow.
And
it's like space camp.
I also went to space camp.
I wish I would have went to space camp.
Space camp was so cool.
I always dreamed of going to space camp. You got to go to space camp
in Huntsville. Yeah. Oh man, it was so cool. Hold on, I have to finish the other one. So at computer camp, we would code things, and I remember like the grand project was I coded a rocket that like moved down the like landing strip and then took off. And that was my like big project.
It's kind of like
my thesis,
the dancing banana in QSYS.
Yeah.
We used to program a thing called Turtle, where you would like say, go forward 10 spaces, then turn 45, then put your pen down. It was like those are procedural ways of thinking that we were learning early on.
So that was computer camp, but space camp, dude, space camp was so cool. First of all, I think space camp was about the time that I started noticing girls a lot. And there were these girls from like Puerto Rico.
17.
No. I think I was 13. Okay. I was what are you in 7th grade?
I think about 13.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
6th or 7th grade.
You're floating around in those jumpsuits. Everyone's all on zero gravity.
No, but it was so cool because it was my first experience in life where I met people from like a long ways away.
Yeah.
Right. So like there were all these people, all these kids who came from around the country, and there were like these 4 girls from Puerto Rico, and there were these guys and like we were in these bunks, like, and the bunks were kind of like you were in like the bunks of a space shuttle.
You're like the chubby kid from Stranger Things.
But I've never been chubby. Like I was so grossly skinny when I was younger. It was ridiculous.
Did anyone believe you had a girlfriend from space camp?
So it's funny because this is really funny because I went on a mission trip my freshman year of high school, and I saw the girls from space camp.
Nice.
When I was there
in Puerto Rico,
but we wrote each other like with real letters.
You did what?
I'm not kidding you.
You wrote each other.
Yeah, I would communicate with these girls from Puerto Rico, and we wrote each other with pen and a paper. I don't think anybody knows that anymore. I mean, speaking of technology, right? I don't know if we're going to talk about email,
like pen pals,
but come on. Yeah, we were pen pals.
Nice.
Yeah.
I actually want to get my kids a actual pen pal. Well, because like they're in first grade. So my two oldest are in first grade.
Right.
So like they're working on their writing. So I think it would be fun for them to like get a pen pal to like work on their writing.
I mean, I feel like I'm a pen pal of Jesse via text these days. Just because,
I mean, it's basically the same thing, right?
Yeah.
It's just smaller.
Just an immediate.
Yeah.
Smaller, immediate.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's so weird.
I mean, in the future, we won't have any. I mean, we're going to think about this. Like, I remember it was my wife was in grad school and she had a teacher who was like, I hate emojis because, you're sending these like faces all the time instead of sending words. And I was like, no, I think that's the greatest thing ever because ultimately you can express so much in a symbol than you can in a word, right? Like you can, for example, if you're religious, you show someone a cross, that it has a whole bunch of meaning that comes flooding at somebody in one little symbol. So you can sort of compact a ton of different information in this really, really small thing. So for me, emojis are like, wow, they're juvenile. It's that same sort of concept, right? Like you can have, winky fingers and an eggplant, and that's going to say a lot to somebody rather than trying to like really write, in the right context. And then soon, if you start removing the phone, you're going to have technology that's sort of embedded either thought-wise or voice-wise or like no device.
Right.
And you're going to be able to share these complex thoughts and emotions with less and less physical input.
I do want to argue with my 7th or 8th grade math teacher. You're not going to just have a calculator in your pocket everywhere you go. Wrong.
But Jesse, I have to ask, like, do you think that we've lost the ability to articulate our feelings in words because of that? Like, I mean, I would argue when you say that, like, yeah, it's cool. But I also look at my children as they text me and go, instead of just giving me a heart emoji, can you say I love you, Dad? Like, I mean, have we lost some level of that?
That's certainly valid. I mean, I sort of think it's similar to like, and this is it seems a bit of a stretch, but to me, it's similar from like listening to music on MP3s versus putting a vinyl record on, right? Because on MP3s, I get this immediate thing. And yes, I'm getting the same sort of content. I'm getting the basics. But when I actually want to listen to something and experience artwork, I'll put a record on and I'll pour over the artwork of the vinyl and I'll look at it and I'll think about it and I'll listen to it deeper. So maybe it's like not bad that we have the shortcut and the long version. It's just that we have to be distinguished between like, yeah, okay, we can communicate. Are you bringing home dinner? Yes, please get milk also really quickly. It doesn't need to be verbose. But when you're actually talking with your family, you're like, maybe you value that more because you're like, I'm talking with my children now. We're having interaction, right?
Yeah.
I think we just have digressed all the way back to the ancient Egyptians. We worship cats and we write on people's walls.
I mean, there's some validity to that. We speak in pictures.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Egyptians loved wine, though, so
they did.
I didn't get it.
If they had whiskey, I think they would have been happier with it.
And I think they invented batteries.
This is true.
Yep.
All right,
so our actual topic.
I know, but we've kind of talked about technology already.
That's fine.
Which is like insightful a bit, right? That we went all this way and we talked about things that probably had a lot to do with our lives.
I'm gonna drink some of this fancy water you got me.
Fancy water is really good. Just saying.
Fancy water is high technology. Just saying.
Yeah. It's mineral water.
Tastes like water.
Jesse, so I'm going to lead with you. I want you to lead because I think this is going to be good. Tell us your first, and this doesn't have to be ranked like 1 to 3, like more important or less important.
Mine's not ranked in any way, shape, or form.
Nor is mine. But tell us the first thing, I guess.
Yeah. What's the first thing on your list?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna start with the easy one because I don't want to like drop a bomb of like everything is technology and everything's important because that's boring. So the first thing I'll say, my first bit of technology that super changed my life at the time was the cassette tape and the cassette tape Walkman, right? Being able to record music from the radio, copy. The most important one for me, honestly, like the thing that changed me so much when I was a young boy, when I was like 12, 13, so my sister was 4 years older than me and she had super cool friends. And they would all make mixtapes for her. And I would go into her room when she wasn't there and I would record her mixtapes. And I would like look at all the stuff her and her friends were listening to and then make my own mixtapes. And then at some point someone got me like a karaoke machine for Christmas for fun. It had a microphone and 2 tape decks and you could sort of record one and overdub onto the other and go back and forth. And I remember making sort of layered multi-tracks that way. I remember I wrote a bunch of songs the way I was getting into the guitar at the time. So for me, the cassette tape was the first technology that was like this massive freedom. I could make my own music. I could take my own music. I would take it with me. We lived 3 or 4 miles from town. So unless I like rode in with my mom when she was working or back home, I would have to take a bike. So a lot of times I would bike into town, for 30, 40 minutes and take my music with me. Like that was
right
when I was that age and I was formulating who I was as a person. Like that was a huge, huge bit of technology for me. So
I would agree.
portable music to cassette deck. Yeah.
I mean, and how great was it that you could do that and it wouldn't skip and you could record over it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like you'd sit around the radio just for that right time that you could record on the song that you wanted.
Yep.
And then you would wait and then you do the next time. And then when that was old, all you needed was one cassette tape for that like moment in your life, right?
So I remember having me and my sister got like a joint Christmas present one year. I don't remember how old I was. I may have been like 8 or 9. And I remember having the radio on with the cassette in, like armed and ready to like go. And so like I would be like doing my chores, and then when a song would come on the radio, like I think at that time Limp Bizkit was really huge, and so like I remember like running through the house trying to like hit record so that I could have that that song on that mixtape, and then listen to it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then like just do it all over again.
Yeah, Jesse, did you ever request a song on a radio station so you could get it?
Absolutely. The embarrassing part is I think what that song was Madonna's Holiday. At the time, I was probably really young, and my sister was probably 12, 13, and she liked it, and I liked it, and I think that was it. But I also around that age was that I had Beastie Boys License to Ill, and I remember singing that, and my mom took the tape away. And then when I was older, I listened to lyrics again. I was like, I was like 7 years old being like, bitch, shoot my gun. Give me my money.
So I totally had the same album that got taken away from me, but it was Sublime. The original Sublime album. Like my parents heard me listening to it. And it was I think that was the first CD I had.
Okay.
And I got that taken away.
Music for me in that area was very interesting because like when my parents got married, my dad was not saved, and he got saved, like radically saved, like burn your records saved.
Okay.
And so like when I was growing up, like it was really difficult to listen to music if it wasn't Christian music. So trying to hide Limp Bizkit and Eminem and stuff from my parents was very complicated.
Yeah.
And like talking to like some like younger guys that have worked for us, and they're talking about like music that they used to hide from their parents. And I just laugh and go, let me pull up some EPs from Eminem and show you what I was hiding from my parents. And they're like, whoa, that's way worse.
I think music really influenced Jesse because I've seen a picture of Jesse with a like a dog collar with spikes on it at one point in his life.
I was going to say, did he have like a Madonna haircut?
I don't remember the hair. All I remember is the dog collar.
Well, I was super into music, obviously. And then, as I was getting more angsty in high school, of course, got into punk and hardcore. And I was lucky in Vermont. We actually had a pretty thriving hardcore scene in Burlington, which is like 45 minutes north. So when I was like later in high school, we would drive every weekend to go see these shows at this place called Club Toast in Burlington. There was a really thriving scene. Another place called 242 Main, which actually Bernie Sanders, when he was mayor, created this like teen club. He was basically like, the kids need a place to go and listen to their music where there's no alcohol. And it was like this teen club in the basement, and it was legendary. Like my band played there, and like we saw bands there. Yeah, like I was super into music. I was definitely my path into sound. And I think the cassette deck was actually that as well, because that mechanical bit of having to like pause it at the right time and like spin the leader maybe if you wanted to get the right lead, or taping over the do not record things on the edge so you can record over a commercial tape. That sort of thing. Like when I was really doing bad in high school, but I was getting into theater, my teacher was like, what do you like? And I'm like, I don't know. I like music and stuff. And he's like, there's buttons and faders over here. Right. So like ultimately that love of music and the cassette deck is what led me on the path to sound. Right. Which led me to where I am today. So now that I'm sort of saying it out loud, it feels like a pretty pivotal piece of technology.
I like it, dude. That's great.
Yeah, man.
You should go.
I should go.
You should.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I'm going to go bigger picture later.
Okay.
I'm going to go fairly narrow for my career path now.
Okay.
And for me,
that'd be the Wi-Fi box.
Yeah, I mean, it made a difference in my career, strangely, but yeah. So if you don't know what he just said, it's a speaker. But No, so it was the digital console, and I'll clarify the digital console. So the digital audio mixing console for me, but
Not a specific one, just it.
No. I'll say a specific one, or I'm going to say two, and I'll explain why.
Okay.
So the Digico D5 Live was the hottest girl in the room in the digital console world when I got into digital consoles. And I was at Southeast Christian Church mixing on this Midas Heritage 3K, which was an analog console.
Massive.
Yeah, big, like as big as the table you and I are sitting at right now.
I remember.
And we had a D5 Live at monitors because we had so many personal in-ear mixes that we needed to do for people. And it was one of the first deployed probably in the world at that point. But I remember looking at things like it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen in my life.
What year was that?
2002.
Okay.
At that point. And I had been around a little bit before then. It was proven technology, but for me, I had been on analog sound consoles my entire life.
Right.
And then seeing that, and that changed something in me, I think, in terms of my career path ultimately and why I'm here today. But it was just the most enamoring piece of technology I'd ever seen in my life. And it was huge, and there were screens and there were all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was really cool. And I would say in conjunction with that, in a very different thread, the thing, and Jesse may laugh at this, but I think he'll understand it. The M7CL was the thing that ultimately crafted my path, because it was this first. So it's this console from Yamaha called the M7CL, and it was the first digital sound console that was achievable for like what I would say the average person or the average company, right? Because that console that I just referenced at that time was like $250,000.
Right.
It was amazing, right? And when Yamaha came out with the M7CL, this console, it was like $20,000. It was the first console.
It was the everyman's version of a digital console, right? It had a bunch of faders. You could get to the stuff. It had the screen. It had and it had all the digital console things. It had the recallability, the snapshots. And honestly, still to this day, Yamaha's snapshot engine is the most full feature because it has absolutely everything, right? You can touch any control point and you can recall any control point. It's like super. So, I mean, I think you're right. Digital consoles as a whole, but those two were.
It was like you went from, I would say opposite spectrums, right? Like the most amazing thing that was ever created initially, and the most usable and accessible thing. But I group them in the same thing. And you can go to today and look at digital consoles, and there's a huge wide spectrum.
Yeah.
But I don't think you'll ever find that difference in cost and usability, et cetera, like in the same era, right?
Yeah, that was the Ticonderoga number 2 HB, the standard, right? Like the everyman pencil that you could, that everyone was like, it's a pencil, like they can write stuff with it, right?
Yeah, and I would
even analog guys could do it. Yeah,
correct.
I mean, there's still so many of those M7s around.
Oh yeah, they're everywhere.
I mean, I think I replaced 3 of them last year.
Right, but they were if you were to kind of look at the whole thing, like you had the predecessor to the high-end console right now, right? Which you can call it whatever it is, SSL. You can call it the big, Digicos like SD7s and Quantum 338s. You can look at the Ravage PM10, right? That was the precursor to that was the SD5 Live.
Yeah, and
then the precursor
wasn't an SD; it was just a D.
Correct. But the precursor to what I think like an M32 today is was the M7CL.
100% agree.
And like those things, like for what we all do is for a living, they were life-changing for me.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not also forget the one that was sort of on that level for me was the Avid profile.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. For theater and stuff?
Well, for rock, so when I did Rock of Ages, which was one of my first early big Broadway musicals, the front of house console was a Avid profile.
Yeah.
And then it fed a bunch of like whatever was limited because it was limited in buses and structure. We fed that into like a Midas Dimitri rig. Well, at the time it was LX300 rig. So LCS basically. They did all the speaker processing.
Yep.
But then also backstage running monitors was an M7CL. So like we had a live monitor mix backstage, M7CL profile up front that was expanded its capabilities with the Meyer stuff. And we had a super complex show, right? With just those little bits. But yeah, those consoles were like rock steady, man.
Yeah.
It's just so crazy for me because like I'm only like 4 or 5 years behind you guys. And those were considered old consoles by the time digital like was coming to my realm.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, the funny thing was, so like at the church that I worked at, when we built our big sanctuary, we bought a D5 and that was the first digital console we had in our building. And it was like, we went from, what was that giant Allen Heath console? The ML5000.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we did that, but we were doing like massive recordings. So it was like every time we did a massive recording, we didn't have enough channels in the ML5000. So like we would rent in like another one or, you know, just another analog console. So we would put like all of our drums and brass on that one and then have the master out of that go into 2 channels on the ML5000 in the main front of house board. And then like those would just be mixed in by that guy so that we could do everything for this giant recording. And then obviously like when we built the new building, you know, bought the D5 and we had what was that? The D1 monitors. And then we had a DSO in our broadcast suite. So it was kind of interesting. So like those were still really big, very predominant consoles at that time because it was like 2006. And we were looking in for our other youth rooms. We wanted to go digital, and PreSonus had just released their Studio Live console.
Yeah.
I no motorized faders.
No, I was a dealer and I stocked those because people were buying them like they were candy.
Yeah. We luckily never bought them. We stuck with our Allen Heath analog consoles until the X32 came out.
Yeah.
Then when that came out, we bought the X32, and obviously like the X32 was revolutionary.
I sold you your X32 in some way or shape or form.
No, I think Gary did. I think we were on to Gary at that point.
Me and Gary.
No, I think you were still at your.
Oh, okay.
I think that was
the other thing.
I mean, I'll do you one better. I did a show in 2012 on Broadway, Elf the Musical, and it was a CADAC console. And I don't know if anybody knows what CADAC consoles are. The British consoles from the 80s.
Oh, nice.
That like got really famous for like early Broadway stuff. Like all the Andrew Lloyd Webber shows were all CADACs, Cats, and like Phantom of the Opera. All analog, but they had a digital CCM control board in the middle, and that thing could do scenes, and it would do mutes on and off, and it could do VCA assignments, and it could do auxes on or off.
Right.
So super basic. And if you wanted to get crazy, you could get flying faders, but they were always twitchy. You had to like field repair them a bunch. But yeah, 2012, I did an analog console, half auto, like some flying faders and some automation. You know,
I mean, didn't you spend
the best sounding show ever though? But it was just like literally 100 feet between the mics and these amazing analog preamps and all analog signal chains. So it actually sounded pretty fantastic.
I mean, didn't you spend most of your time with the CADAC rewrapping things so that the faders would move and like servicing it?
You had to be really methodical about capturing anything. Like if you were like, okay, I'm going to store. Everybody cool? Yeah, okay. Everybody hands off. We're storing it.
Okay, so Justin, we need to move to you.
Yeah. So I'm going to go kind of off of yours, and I think I think Jesse's point with the whole cassette thing does play into that really well. But I think what kind of launched me kind of going from, I did this whole thing where I was always super interested in electronics, but I never really knew what that looked like, what that meant. It was just, there's a piece of electronic in front of me, you know, tear apart a pair of headphones and rewire them and turn them into a microphone type thing.
Right.
And I never really understood what that would turn into or how I could like go down that path. And working at that church that I was working at, volunteering, I was in 6th grade and I was mixing for the very first time on a Mackie 1604, I think is what that was. And there's a 16 channel, you know, analog console. Yeah. I think it had like, you know, 4 bands of EQ, I think. Three, maybe it was 3. Yeah. And that was the first time I ever actually started to understand that electronics are real things, not just something you go to the store and buy and, you know, tear apart and throw away.
Yeah.
So that kind of launched me into, I stepped foot in that sound booth for the very first time because there was no one there to run it and they needed someone to literally unmute something and push a fader up. So I had, I think his name was Chris. He was a volunteer in the room and he was like, you want to push a fader for me? And I was like, sure, why not?
I can do that.
I can do that. And he's like, cool, you get to sit back here the whole service. And I was like, badass.
Yeah.
And I've never left the sound booth since.
Yeah.
I'm super simple.
What was the first console you ran, Jesse? Do you know?
Oh, geez.
Mine was also a Mackie.
It would be a Mackie. Yeah, the one in high school would have been a Mackie for sure.
I think
After that, it was
the
a Soundcraft
1604.
K3
Yeah. I think the 1604 might have been my first one in my church when I was a kid.
Nice.
Which is where I got my start. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we had a 32. We had a 3204.
Nice. And then we evolved to an Allen and Heath GH something.
Yeah, so I think we went to in the next youth room we had a Mackie. I think it was the 32, like you, Jesse. Yeah. And then when that finally died, we went to a GL something.
Yeah. Or GL.
People loved that Mackie sound back then because I feel like people I feel like almost, maybe I'm totally wrong, but it feels like right when we were all starting, or maybe I'm maybe a couple years older than you guys, but it seems like people were just starting to get like oh yeah, we're going to make this good audio now, right? It seemed like there was a dark period where people were just like, we're just making it heard, right? Like we talked about this a lot at L Acoustics. It seemed like there was a period where it was just about just getting an achievable show, right? Making it loud enough and good enough quality and evenly distributed enough that people were like, it's okay, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like maybe late 90s is when people were like, let's make it sound good live, right? Like the VDOS had been out for a few years at that point. And it feels like console-wise, like the Mackie had that very specific sound, and people were like, "Oh, I know the name Mackie," and they got that great sound, right? It sort of became very ubiquitous.
So, we'll keep moving forward, right?
Yeah.
Jesse, what's number 2 for you?
This is where I'm going to start my tirade, right? And you can totally stop me, but like this is where I feel like the one that's going to take my last 2 spots is basically going to be computing at large, right? So computing at large has changed everyone's life since it was invented, right? I mean, talking about the transistor in the 50s, right? After Roswell alien crash, all of a sudden we got computers. Crazy. And then, totally joking. But just in general, since, and like that computing platform has been changing, right? So when we were in high school, it was desktop computers and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden laptops were ubiquitous, and now it's mobile computing. And for me, in the last 20 years, laptop and mobile computing have been absolute radical changes in my life. Like I was able to make my living on my laptop basically, and then also showing up to theaters and pushing faders. But like so much of that work was done beforehand on a laptop, whether it be CAD drafting or audio editing or recording in a studio or any of that stuff. And then mobile stuff lately has been taking these huge leaps forward. In terms of like, for me also, I'm a musician, music creation. The other thing is since sound has totally been blown apart because of COVID, I've been getting into computer programming. So lately I've been like learning Python and all these using UI and UX stuff I've been learning and trying to build some apps. So basically like my entire life is on the computer now. And like my whole way of living is on the computer now. So at large, like computing, it's crazy. The platform is getting smaller and smaller. So it's laptop and then mobile. And I think what's coming next, obviously, the next big shift is going to be augmented reality and virtual reality. I think actually augmented reality is going to be the first, earlier, most integrated option. Because for me, again, it's all about what is technology and how integrated is it into your life. And when technology becomes so integrated into your life that you don't notice it anymore, it sort of ceases to become technology. And then you sort of look forward to the next thing. And that's what's really exciting to me. It's like, what's the thing after that, right? Imagine text messaging, sending emojis, all that stuff. That's going to become more and more integrated, more easy, take less of your attention, less of your time, right? You're going to be able to more fluently communicate things to people and to create things more fluidly and more easily as time goes on. So that to me is this crazy race that we're on. I'm loving it. I think over the course of my adult life, I have seen radical leaps. It's become more and more a part of my life. And, I think I oftentimes run into people in my family where people are like, technology's bad. And I'm like, yeah, if you let it take over your life, it's bad. But like, It's like everything else, right? It is a tool. It is like, and there's no escaping it. And there's no escaping that it's changed everyone's life on this planet and, forever. So end rant.
No, I mean, so you just took my number 2.
Transistor.
I mean, you and I share a number 2. That's exactly where I was about to go. And I don't know that I could have even articulated it as well as you did, to be quite honest.
Oh man, riff on it, man. I know we've had these talks late at night after a couple of cocktails. Like, I've heard you riff on this.
Yeah. And I think we've done that on planes. And the greater part of that whole conversation is when you see the trickle down technology to phones, right? And I mean, you know, all of those things, like the things that we have, like we have the computer in our pocket is more powerful by magnitudes than what landed Apollo on the moon.
Yeah, I think like the computing power was like, I think something like 48 megabytes of RAM or something like that.
Like that process, like when you think about that, and I read a thing the other day about, I've been watching these. So I watched this thing on Netflix called Away. And it's a mini series or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, but I think the predecessor to that was called Mars.
Yeah. Okay.
And so and that's that ran 2 seasons.
Yeah.
So I've been watching that too. And the idea of like, they're talking about how, and this is in conjunction with reading another article about how now currently the next SpaceX mission to go to space will dock with the International Space Station.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to be there for 6 months. So it needs to move itself and dock somewhere else in space.
Okay.
With no one in it.
Right.
Okay. So literally they're talking about the software to make this happen, or the programming to make this happen, that no one will be in the crew cabin.
Right.
It will undock itself from the International Space Station. It will move around. It's going to redock itself in space in no gravity.
Right.
All by itself. Right. And when you look at like the videos that we saw of what happened during Apollo and how much crew interaction happened.
Right.
And then you look at that proxy and it's just insane. But then we look at that on a bigger picture and we think, all of it is in this race or idea to land on Mars.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, dude, you want to see that technology? Look no further than that freaking Elon Musk thing that like it takes off and then the booster lands itself on the middle of the platform in the middle of an ocean with waves on it.
And you watch the videos from Elon Musk and he's like, this is pivotal to that idea, right? Reusability is pivotal to our ability to be on Mars.
Right. Yeah. Well, like, wasn't the last SpaceX like shuttle up there? That was the first one to
2 months. Yep.
Well, I mean, but that was the first shuttle to ever dock on ISS automatically, not manually.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of this,
I made my kids sit down and watch that. And they're like, why are we watching this? They're in first grade. Right. And I'm like, this is history.
Because this is important.
And my wife's like, yeah, I guess I can sit here and watch this with you. And she's like, I hate space. I'm terrified of it. And I'm like, this is such a big deal.
Oh my God, I can't imagine being terrified of space. I'm so enamored by it.
So the crazy thing
I'm
is,
terrified of space, dude. That's terrifying.
No.
You fart in the wrong direction, you float out towards the sun, you're done for.
So this is the crazy thing. We just had this conversation. So I am like infatuated with space. All of the TV shows I watch are all space related, everything. And we were talking because like my wife, like we're watching the show The Expanse right now. Jesse, have you seen The Expanse? It's on Amazon Prime. Nope. It's fantastic.
I'll have the recommendation though, because I need new stuff.
Yeah, it's that in a way.
It's fantastic. And so there's a lot of these episodes where they're putting spacesuits on and they're like, I'm just going to jump from this ship to that ship. Or they're like, we have to get over there, but we can't go, faster than a specific thing. I'm just going to put my spacesuit on and I'm just going to float through space. And she's like, hell no. There's just no way that I could do this. And I'm like, yeah, that'd be awesome. Because like there's this shot where like the door, the airlock door opens up.
Right.
And like the camera swings behind them and it's just like stars. And like they just step out and float off. And she's like, no.
I want to so bad.
I'm like, that's so awesome. So this is where it gets funny because my biggest fear in life is suffocating.
Oh,
I'm terrified of drowning. And she's like, then how does space not terrify you? And I'm
like,
take
you diving.
I'm like, I don't know. I see, like, I don't panic. Like,
it's
I don't
the
like
reverse space to me.
Yeah. Like I don't panic when I'm like underwater. But I definitely do not like it. at all.
You don't panic when you're underwater, but you know that if you're there just a little too long, you will panic.
Right.
Or you know that you might panic.
Yeah, I probably that's a really good thing. So like it is in my mind that if I don't get myself out of this right now, I probably would panic.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think everybody has that, like that's that fear of, you know, that death or whatever, like unknown, like suffocating. Like for me, it's space. I imagine to go out there and it's not suffocation. It's like you start drying up or something, like freezing from the outside in. Getting like turned to stone.
You guys gotta watch these shows.
So my son was born in early January this year, right before all this pandemic hit, which is crazy. But I will say that one thing I've said over and over again, and my wife hates me for it, but like I always say, like I wish for my son that he sets foot on another planet, with a caveat that it's because he's chosen to and not because he has to. Right. Whatever that means, whether it's like militarily or whether it's like fleeing something that's gone bad. But I'm like, I hope he sets foot on another planet for, you know, and intentionally, right? You know, for a good thing.
Oof.
And who knows?
Yeah, we can't go down that road.
2020, you never know.
That's another podcast. Yeah, that's another podcast episode in itself.
So my number 2 is a lot more pointed. It's not as broad. And it was so obviously like I got involved at church because of the sound console, like started mixing and started being really like enthused about electronics in general. And so fast forward a handful of years and my school offered video classes. So we have a local college here. It's called Compass Arts. So they paid for someone from there to come in and teach a class for, you know, like 3 times a week or whatever. And one of the people from our school donated a bunch of computers, and the computer that was donated was the iMac G4, which is the round base with the arm with the display on it. And that was the first Mac I ever we had a Mac when I was a kid, you know, and we didn't really do anything on it. Like I think I had like Minesweeper on it and that was it.
Right.
But this was the first Mac that like I actually like used as the computer, and it had Final Cut Express on it because that's, you know, that was free at the time. And I learned how to edit video on this iMac, and it was like mind blowing to me that I was able to create something that I've been watching on TV.
So that's the thing that precursed you doing what you do for us.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, and it was one of those things like, I mean, we had some really, you know, crappy cameras that they had donated. They were like little Sony, like handy cams. And so, I mean, we did a lot of really cool things where, you know, they had us try to like write a small story out, like storyboard it. And then we had to shoot it in camera without editing it, and then bring it into the computer and look and see how it would look. So it was like every scene had to be perfect. And if we didn't like it, we had to rewind it and reshoot it because like that was like
tape. We're back to tape.
Well, I don't even know.
You're like making a mixtape. Yeah, you're pausing it at the right
making
time.
A video mixtape.
Yeah, because they were DV tapes, like the little tapes. Yeah. So it was that was just really interesting. And it was like being able to like, it was kind of in that like realm where it's like not everyone had a computer, you know. And it was like Macs were like the big thing, you know, starting to become the big thing. It was just really interesting, really intriguing. And my mind was just like, oh my God, the possibilities are endless now.
Right. Wow. That's I mean, you know, if we continue to circle on this technology, like it's your video, you know, if I could typecast both of you, Jesse is very much an audio guy and a music guy, and you're very much a video guy to me. Yeah. And the fact that both of your formats or something that changed your life relied on tape.
Mm-hmm.
And we have an interesting meld of that now, right? With digital, that we can just re-record again.
Right.
But you also can't get rid of what sucks. And
I mean, that is a commonality, right?
Like because the file exists now. Like when I do something really dumb on camera, like it's there forever. And then you guys use it against me in text, in groups, or in pictures.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I
mean, Josh, Facebook still got pictures of you with your emo hair. So
right.
I think,
so
DJ Mikely.
this is the point. that I'm saying my flock of seagulls hair.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I was filming video announcements for the church I was at, and the guy that was filming, he had like a color card up in front of him, and he was like, I don't remember what it was, but I hit record. Like literally I hit record, and he's like, and he said his name. He's like, I'm so-and-so, and this is my nipple. Like he was like joking around because it was just me and him.
Yeah.
And he didn't know I hit record. And I just started laughing, and then we went through and we recorded video announcements. Well, that was, I don't know, 7 years ago. That randomly, like I will randomly come across just that clip and I will text it to him. And he's like, is this blackmail? And I'm like, well, at this point, kinda.
Maybe a little.
I wish I still had it. I wish I had it right now to play it for you guys, but I did a show in Vegas once that was ill-fated. It was a Beach Boys musical, right? Like someone tried to write a musical of Beach Boys music. It was just wrong. It went wrong 20 different ways to Sunday. It was like running rep with another show, and it was like really bad. But there was one point they were like, we're not getting that Beach Boys sound. We need like all those guys, like the harmonies. And, you know, we'd say like, listen, those guys sit in the booth together over one microphone, and they all practice for hours and hours and hours at a time, and like got the one track on tape.
Right.
So we had got a special booth. They were talking about hiring a Beach Boys cover band to sit in there, like do that. They never did that. Right. So like, they're like, why can't we get this Beach Boys sound? Well, one night, me and the designer, a friend of mine, Peter Hylinski, is a Broadway guy. We're listening through recording the show, and we're listening through doing mixing after hours. And we had recorded, we started phoning out some of the ensemble ladies that were dancing. And just like, we had this hilarious track of them being like, oh, wow. We like recorded it on our phones and played it back for the director. And we're like, this is the problem, right? And she's like, oh my God, what is that? We're like, those are your actors, right? So like, yes, number one, there's no fixing. It's a microphone, not a miracle, right? Like it's not, you can't fix everything in post. But what I think is super interesting about everyone's commonalities with tech and what they do is this is sort of the ultimate experience of technology is all of a sudden something that was out of reach is all of a sudden within your reach, and not just within your reach, but easy, right? So like for that, people couldn't read and couldn't write, and they couldn't even get a freaking pen. And then at some point, 100 years later, it was pretty common for some people to be able to read, write, and have a pen, and have access to paper, and be able to write their own books and write their own thoughts down. And as obvious as that sounds to us now, at some point that was a radical leap. So the thing is like, what's the next thing, right? Like we've all, okay, let's just say we have the full ability to do whatever we want to do. We can create sounds or visuals or whatever we want really quickly and really cleanly from our mind to our reality. What is the next leap after that? Or like, do we just get better at that? Does it get faster and faster?
I mean, so you just defined my third, and I'm going to jump in, which was the internet.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And like everything you just said so bolsters that argument that it allowed us to be connected. And like today, I'll tell you that like I'm sitting on my couch watching football, you know, as weird as that is right now. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, as I'm looking through Facebook, I want this to be gone, right? Like the level of immediate, I guess, immediate information, but it is insane. But if I step back, I think, wow, even 10 years ago in my life, I didn't have access to the information at the speed I do. And to your point, Jesse, I don't think that information will get to us any faster. We literally have the speed of information mastered, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a notification on your phone.
I think how it's delivered and why it's delivered that way. And you can go all the way back to say the internet is the thing that changed that, right? You can make arguments to say that the telephone or the things that preceded the internet were things that define that, but I would disagree only on the stance that the internet was the first thing to connect the world immediately, right? Like I could have information even with dial-up, even with AOL, right? I had immediate access to someone in China.
Yeah.
Like
yeah, I have a very vivid memory of playing Quake and playing against people in Japan. Being like, holy shit, I am playing real time against people in Japan. We're blowing each other up.
Right.
It's awesome.
And like, that's freaking crazy to think, like, at that time, even with our ping speeds and all that stuff, right? Like, that was immediate. And we had never had that in our life. And to me, the internet obviously is defining what happens as we move forward.
Yeah. I look at it like this too, is think back to like 9/11. I remember, like, obviously where I was when we found out about it.
Right.
But it was like someone from the office at our school, like had to be watching the news and then like let every teacher know. And then the teachers were like, hey guys, just so you know, this is what just happened. You know, like my dad had no idea. My mom called him and was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know,
and the internet kind of existed at that point, right?
Right.
But not on the level that it does now.
Right.
And if you look at that curve, like Jesse said, it's insane. But I would go even farther back than that. And I'm like, I remember back when the original OJ trial happened, right? I was
we were in school.
Yeah, I was in math class in 5th grade when that whole thing came down. They put it on the tube TV that was hung in the corner. I mean, think about the mount that it took to hang that tube TV, by the way, because it was big.
Yeah.
Okay.
They didn't even have them. They were so big when I was dating my cart when I was in school.
Yeah.
It was like, they didn't even try to mount them.
And it had a VHS player under it, of course. Right. But
tape
in 5th grade math class with Mr. Boss. That was his name, by the way. My math teacher's name was Mr. Boss. Who screws with him, man? He was 6'8". Was 300 pounds. No, I'm not kidding you. Google him. Okay. The man was huge and his name was Mr. Boss.
That's awesome.
But regardless of that,
you thought I was going to Google him, didn't you?
It's okay. You should. He taught for Byron Center Schools.
No, it's okay. We don't.
At the time I was in 6th grade. It was 6th grade.
You need a young Jamie. Young Jamie, pull that shit up.
Yeah. But that was bizarre. Anyway, to see that, and like now, you know, as we've moved forward, we see these things in real time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure I get alerts about the game I'm watching.
Yeah.
Who wins before it's over.
Did your team win today?
No.
They always find a way to lose, don't they?
Always.
Yeah.
What's your team?
He's a Lions fan.
To the day I die.
It's their special talent to find a way to lose after coming out strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We digress.
Not to go to sports ball and all. Okay. So
they kicked
Jesse. You have a third.
They kicked 4 home runs today.
Did they?
Oh, well, I will use my third because I sort of feel like my second was my second and third. I will use that to wrap it up because I do have to go to an Eliza Schlesinger concert right now.
Yeah.
I was going to make a point just now, which totally escaped me because my wife came in and distracted me. But I will say that, like, for me, I know what it is. So my third one is sort of like, again, it's based on computing, but basically it's like a programming language called Python. So Python is like, when I started seeing COVID go south in my industry, I basically was like, I better learn something else. So I started trying to learn how to code. And I've dabbled in code before, and I feel like with audio, I've got a mindset for it. But Python is sort of the entry level programming language where, like, basically if you want to import flying, you could just say import flying, and all of a sudden you can do all this crazy stuff. So it like lets you learn the biggest basics of programming and like learn how to do really cool stuff.
Right.
Super powerful and super easy and readable as well. So it's not like semicolon / hyper sin blah, 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 blah. It's all like real world stuff like import this, do that, if this, then that. Right. So that's my next biggest one. But, you know, my next sort of transition I'm making, you know, because since audio is sort of so decimated right now, is sort of trying to get into that, but basically into the user interface and user experience direction.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I did a bit of that with audio. I feel like, honestly, in mixing, it's all about user interface and user experience. Like, how do you make, at least in Broadway, how do you make the mixer have the most seamless interaction where it's as easy to touch things as possible? There's no thinking, right? You just react and do it. So like user interface and user experience. So one of the things as I'm doing theoretical stuff is making user interfaces for augmented reality things. So basically I'm making like a heads up display for a motorcycle visor, right? And like, what would that look like? That's not distracting. That's not in the middle of the road. But like, as I'm thinking about technology, like I'm trying to think of like, what things can you offload to the very edges of your periphery that are just things that you don't need to focus on. They're just things you need to know, right? Like, I have a message, or there's an alert up here, or like there's something I need to know, or like maybe you get enough of a preview to say, so-and-so texted, I'll meet you there, right? So I think that's going to be the first step in the new wave of technology is what small things that are lightweight things that we don't need to focus on can we offload to something that is like peripheral. So for us, if we get a notification, yeah, you got a dentist appointment coming up, you can see that pass by you. And as long as you've noticed it and as long as it's there, it doesn't have to be persistent. It doesn't have to be something you take out with your phone. It doesn't even have to be a haptic feedback on your watch.
Right.
It can just be a passing thing that you notice and acknowledge. And I think that's going to be the first step in offloading some of these real world things we're doing with phones now, with interfaces, to just being like integrated technology that's part of our everyday. It's like, second sense, sixth sense almost, like whether it be, watch stuff or whatever. So that's my number 3. It's like the future of technology is going to change our lives. I'm looking forward to that.
Nice.
Yeah, totally. My number 3, last and final, is, kind of going down that video path, was the 5th gen iPod.
Oh,
which was the iPod video.
The iPod is on like every top tech device ever.
Yeah. It's
list.
insane. Like, so I was trying to figure out which generation was the iPod video. Yeah. And so I was starting to see all this information, and then seeing how many iPods had been sold.
Yeah.
Is insane how many iPods have been sold. But like the iPod video was such a big deal because now I could take video with me in my pocket.
Dude. Yeah. And I remember watching like shows on that screen.
The tiny,
I was watching
it was this big.
Lost. You remember Lost, the TV show?
Yes, I watched Lost on an iPod video.
Yeah, so did I. So like that was the cool thing is like I was able to edit video, put it on my iPod to bring it to people to go like, check out this video I made.
Right.
And then it was also like sitting in school like watching Lost.
Dude, mind blown.
Yeah. So it was such a big deal because that was the precursor to the iPod Touch.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously the iPod Touch kind of came out it was a couple months after the iPhone came out, but I mean, who could really afford an iPhone when it first came out?
Right.
The iPod Touch was like half the cost because it didn't have the phone in it. That was literally the only difference.
My first iPhone was iPhone 2.
Mine was the 4.
Okay.
I
waited in line all night. I slept overnight in a sleeping bag in a parking lot to get my iPhone 2.
So the only things I stood in line for were like Xboxes and PlayStations.
Okay.
And it was
in line for the very first iPhone at the Apple Store in Fifth Avenue.
Did you? For like Gen 1?
The very first one.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember, let's see, the PlayStation 3, I sat in line for 3.5 days.
Yeah.
Oh my God. For the PlayStation 3.
That's super commitment.
Bro, so I took vacation day from work, 3 of them. So I still got paid. But this was the great thing. I bought it. It was, I don't know, it was like $600 or something like that. I bought it, not even to play it.
Oh, you sold it.
I walked out of Best Buy, 15 feet from the door, sold it to a guy for $1,800. Boom. That's the only reason why I did that. The Xbox, I was a Halo player.
Yeah.
So like I didn't really, I didn't give 2 shits about PlayStation. I just wanted the money.
That's funny.
And it was like all my friends wanted to do it. I just remember because like that was like at the beginning of people like waiting in line for those kind of things.
Yeah.
And I remember ordering a pizza to us because we were in a tent. It was me and like 3 or 4 of my friends. Yeah. We ordered a pizza and they're like, okay, what's the address? And I was like, well, I don't really know. It's the Best Buy.
It's a parking lot.
And I'm the 4th tent in line from the door. And they're like, are you being serious right now? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, if we get there, and you're not there, we're going to be upset. I'm like, I'm sitting here waiting in line to buy this PlayStation 3. And they're like, okay. And so like the guy got there and he was like, you guys are insane.
Nowadays they're like, all right, 10-3, you red stripes on the top. Okay, cool. We'll be there in 10 minutes. No problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Best Buy puts out like they bring in like porta johns and stuff like that for those kind of things now. It's just insane. It's all accepted now.
Well, hey, Jesse has a concert to go to tonight.
Yep.
Or a show, an outdoor show.
It's a comedian. I don't know if you guys know Eliza Schlesinger. She's a lady comedian. She's very fun to watch. She's very funny and she is quite attractive. And there's red wine involved, and I'm excited. I'm here for it.
That's awesome. Jesse, I cannot thank you enough for being here with us today.
I'm so glad to be here. This was so much fun, guys.
It's our maiden voyage.
It's awesome to share life and thoughts and technology together. And I think we'll have you on again at some point.
For sure.
Only if I can do it in person. Like we had talked about before COVID, I was like,
would love that so much.
And we were going to sit at the table together.
The plan was for you to be here. Yeah. But hey, man, have an awesome show. say
Thanks,
hi to
guys.
Van and Asa for us.
Thank
And,
you. And to your cheers as well. And to your lady,
Yeah.
congratulations, and say hey, and congratulations on show number 1, you guys.
Thanks. Thank
Always
you.
great conversating with you both.
It's great to talk with you. Thank you for being here.
Many great successes going forward.
Thanks, man. You too.
Call me anytime. I can be a panelist anytime. I can insert catty comments from the sidelines.
Yeah.
At any time.
Well, we'll bring you in. Safe travels, and we'll talk soon.
All right.
Thanks,
I'll be
guys.
seeing you guys on the internets.